All right, we're live. Welcome everybody to another community team Q&A. We do these every week here on ubuntuonair.com, and it's a chance for us to give everybody an update on what we've been doing on the community side of things with Ubuntu, and also to take any and all questions that you might have and get you an answer to them. So we are broadcasting on ubuntuonair.com, and right there will be an IRC window, which is connected to hash ubuntu-on-air on Freenode IRC. That's where you can ask us your questions. If you start it with the word question in all capital letters, I'll get a nice big highlight on it so that I don't miss it, and we will come back and answer them in the order that they were asked. Today we've got myself, Michael Hall, we've got Nick Skaggs, and Alan Pope, all of us from the community team. All right, the first question from Popey is, how awesome is Michael Hall? And I'm going to say maybe like a 5. I mean, Popey and Nick, they're up like 9's level. I'm kind of in the middle.
And that's a scale of 100, yeah?
You play yourself down too much. So, are there any announcements we've got for this week before we start questions?
Yeah,
I know there's one thing we need to mention, the fact that we probably won't be here next week.
Yeah. So why don't you tell everybody why? Well, why you won't be there at least. I have a different reason.
So, oh yes, you have a different reason. So next week, every few months, we have a regular sprint at Canonical, and it's an opportunity for us to get together and work in the same place. We have loads of meetings scheduled. It's an absolutely densely packed week, and there's loads of planning meetings, discussion, all kinds of internal stuff. And we've invited a bunch of community people to come along as well. We have sprints that are often focused on one particular topic. Often it's focused on the cloud, or focused on desktop or devices or something. This particular one is focused on devices, so it's mostly related to phone and the various platform infrastructure bits that are required for phone. Yeah, as I said, we have invited a bunch of community people to come along as well. So we're holding this in Washington, D.C., in the US of A. And we'll have, I think, 10 community people coming along who are going to help us crack through some bugs, do some planning, work on, future stuff. It's all super interesting and fun and hard work, and I look forward to it. But that's why some of us won't be around much on IRC next week.
All right. I had an announcement, a couple announcements actually. David Kelly, who's been doing some documentation work for us lately, has just posted a new Scopes developer tutorial on developer.ubuntu.com/scopes. So if you're interested in writing a scope for the Ubuntu phone, which is a way to get content right on the dash, we've got a great new tutorial for you. We've got a new template also, and lots of updates to the SDK to help you do that. So if you're interested, go there, find out the information about how to do it, and get started. It's really become a lot easier than it used to be to write a scope. And then the other announcement is that the Ubuntu Online Summit is coming up next month, November 12th through the 14th. We've got it open now for session submissions, so if you have something that you want to talk about during the Ubuntu Online Summit, either development planning for the 15.04 release, or if you want to give a presentation or workshop or anything else about 14.10 or earlier releases, we've got several tracks that you can propose a session to. They will all be on air like this one, with a video broadcast and an IRC counterpart for people who can't actually see the video or get on the video. I'm in the process of recruiting track leads right now for that. I've got some that have already agreed to do it that were track leads last time, and I'll be recruiting some more. So find a track lead for your track when you submit a session. You'll need their approval, and they'll be the ones who put it on the schedule for you. If you're interested in being a track lead, we need some help on the users track, which is a new addition for Ubuntu Online Summit, where we have content that's focused on supporting our users of the current release, teaching them how to do things, that kind of thing. To be a track lead for that, your main responsibility as a track lead is to review session submissions, approve them or decline them, and then get the approved ones on the schedule. You might need to help some people during the actual week of the online summit, but we do ask that people who submit sessions be prepared to run those sessions themselves. That means having a Google Plus account connected to your YouTube account so that you can start and run an on-air hangout. And we've got instructions on how to do that on the wiki, wiki.ubuntu.com/UDS. It's really not terribly difficult to do. All right, those were my updates. Nick, did you have any updates?
Sure. As everyone knows, Utopic is soon to be released, very soon. It should be, what, about a week and a couple days, right? So there you go. There's the release schedule. So with that in mind, naturally, me loving quality and testing so much, it's the time to test some images. So starting this Thursday and really kicking off next Monday, we'll be doing image testing. So if you want to experience Utopic a bit early before everybody else, and perhaps upgrade your machine or grab the image from cdimage.com or .ubuntu.com and give it a test and report results to the ISO tracker, that would be wonderful. If that all sounds like gibberish to you, that's okay. You can go visit us on the QA team wiki, and there's some more information there. Or just go to iso.qa.ubuntu.com, and there's some nice instructions at the top talking about how to get the image, how to download it, put it on your machine, install it, run it in a live session, whatever it is that you want to do. And then be sure and report those results, and we would really appreciate it, especially successful results. Even if you don't find anything wrong, that's great. We like to hear about those things too, just so we can feel better about knowing how many people have tested the release and confirm that things are working. So, and for the rest of you who might not want to download an early image or test anything, mark your calendars for the 23rd and get ready to celebrate a new version of Ubuntu landing. So if you're weird like me and you upgrade to every release, heck, I'm running Utopic now, but if you follow the development cycle and you're upgrading constantly as we go from LTS to LTS, it's a happy day for you. So circle that that date, and like I said, get ready for Utopic to land. It's exciting.
Can I also mention, while we're on the subject of testing ISOs, there's a new community, so far unofficial flavor of Ubuntu that could do with some help testing as well. It's the Ubuntu Mate remix, and you can find out more at ubuntu-mate.org. They have ISOs available for download. Same kind of deal as with the main ISOs. Test it out in a VM, test it on a real machine. Try it out. It's Ubuntu 14.10, but with the Mate desktop, which looks very similar to the old GNOME 2 of days gone by.
I still can't get used to the way you pronounce that.
Well,
Yes.
that's not my decision. That's the way Upstream pronounce it, so I'm just saying it the way they want me to say it.
Mate and GNOME.
Yeah, that's
Like-
made for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Conspiracy to mispronounce things.
So the logo for Ubuntu Mate, interesting tidbit that I discovered last weekend. The logo for Ubuntu Mate Remix is a kind of play on the Circle of Friends. The Circle of Friends, the Ubuntu logo with the three people in a circle, and it's three green triangles in a circle, and it's been coined the Circle of Mates rather than the Circle of Friends, which is quite nice, I think.
All right, question time. Go ahead and ask your questions whenever you think of them. We'll go through them one at a time. Don't wait until the last minute because there is a delay on the video. So if you ask at the very last minute, we may have already ended the broadcast and you just don't know it yet. So get your questions in early, get them in often, and we will get to as many of them as we can. The first one from
Also,
Light and
don't
Dark.
wait until tomorrow.
What?
Sorry, don't wait until tomorrow either. We get people who drop by the IRC channel and don't realise that this is live on Tuesday, the 14th of October, and they're watching it played back later on YouTube, and then jump by the IRC channel and ask us questions. And sadly, we're not there.
Right. That does bring up another thing, though. If you do have to drop off, you can come back and watch the video anytime on YouTube. It'll be on ubuntuonair.com until another live broadcast bumps it off the front page. But the video will be on YouTube. It's youtube.com/ubuntuonair. You can go back and watch it anytime. So the first question I think we've already answered from Light and Dark Soul. He asked, when will Ubuntu 14.10 come out? And the answer to that is in about a week and a half. So it's usually the second to last Thursday of the month, or second to last week of the month on that Thursday.
23rd.
Yeah. So 14.10, because of our version numbering scheme, that means it's 2014 and the 10th month, which is October. So it's coming out sometime this month, most likely that Thursday. All right, next question from Nick is Pseudo. What is the future of Unity? So it depends a little bit on what you mean. We've got Unity 8 on the phone right now. We've got Unity 7 on the desktop and Unity 8 that's working its way there. We have a live CD image that you can try Unity 8 desktop with, but it's really not ready for general use yet. It's still mostly the tablet interface. I actually have a blog post that's going to be going up on my blog later today or tomorrow from Will Cook, who is our new desktop team manager, talking about the current state of Unity 8 and what the future plans for that are. So as soon as I get some last little things answered from him, I'll be publishing that, and you can get an update. The long and short of it is that now that we have a pretty stable phone version of Unity 8, we're going to start picking up work on the desktop version. There's already been a little bit of stuff being done in the background to support Unity 8 as a desktop session. And like I said, we've got an ISO you can test that with. But most of the visual interface has not changed. So you won't really see much difference yet, but hopefully in the next cycle or two that will change dramatically, and we'll have a full Unity 8 desktop mode for you to use. You two have anything to add to that?
I was just saying I left the link for the Unity 8 desktop ISO. If anyone wants to check it out, I think we mentioned that just about every broadcast now. It's pretty cool if you want to see live in person on your desktop where Unity 8 is headed, and it's a live CD, so it's not going to mess with your system. So.
All right. Richie asks, what will be probably the main focus during 15.04 cycle? Now when you've got Ubuntu Touch almost successfully released. So the phone is still going to be a focus next cycle. We've already got work items planned out for updates to the phone after the initial device releases. So we're planning on the first set of over-the-air updates to those devices. That's still going to be a main focus in 15.04. As I mentioned, getting Unity 8 ready for desktop is going to be a main focus in 15.04. In the backend and server, I'm not real sure. I know there's been work going into getting systemd ready. I think, is it Pitty that's working on that? Martin Pitt?
Yeah, it's either Pitty or MVO. I can't remember one of the two.
Martin's been doing quite a bit on that.
Right.
He's not the only one.
I'm sure that will be a focus in the next cycle. I don't know if it's planned to replace 15.04 or not, though. But there will be continued work on that, and syncing with Debian and their migration to systemd also. That's all that I know about 15.04 focuses.
Well, that's where it's worth mentioning the Ubuntu Online Summit, which is where a lot of that discussion happens about what we're going to do and what we're going to focus on in 15.04 and beyond. And we're not, when we're doing planning, we always talk about the next release. Immediately after a release comes out, we always talk about what's going to happen in the next one. But really, we're planning, way further than that. We're planning for 1604 and maybe what happened things. So and that has an influence on decisions we make now for 1504. So for example, we've been talking a lot about Mir and Unity 8, knowing that the target is to have Unity 8 and stop in 1604, that's 2016, which is not long away. It's only 18 months away for that release. And so that only gives us a year's worth of time to work on that. So we need to figure out whether we want to land those things in 1504 or 1510 if they're ready. And the strategy behind how we do that. In a similar way, if you think back to how back in 2009 and 2010, we had the Ubuntu Netbook remix, which had the Unity interface first. So when we first showed off Unity, it was in a remix. It wasn't the default desktop. It wasn't just landed straight away without any testing and without the opportunity for people to try it out and figure out how it integrates with everything else. And that's really what we're doing with Unity 8 as well. We've got this Unity Next ISO, and then maybe 1504, maybe 1510.
So if you're interested in following along with those discussions, like I said, it's going to be November 12th through the 14th. It will all be on summit.ubuntu.com. If you go there now, you'll see the dates and the tracks, but not much else because we're just getting to where we're recruiting sessions. That schedule will start filling up over the next month and be ready to go by the 12th. So be sure to join that and follow along if you can. If you can't make it, just like this, they will all be recorded on YouTube, and you can go back to summit.ubuntu.com anytime and watch those. If you want to go back and watch videos from previous online summits and developer summits, those are all still on summit.ubuntu.com also. There's a link to past summits. Click on that and go find sessions you're interested in, and you can watch those videos and follow along with the IRC that happened. All right, moving on. Just Caracas asks, should I temporarily switch away from utopic-devel? Which I assume you're talking about the phone image channel.
Right, that would be my assumption as well. Personally, since I am lucky enough to have a couple devices, I'm actually running one on utopic-devel and one that runs the RTM channel instead. If I had to pick one, I would suggest that you run just the RTM channel, as that is the focus at the moment, and I suspect might be the focus going forward. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out once, I guess, once we have a stable channel, RTM become that sort of stable channel, and development will continue to happen inside Devel. In which case, you might want to switch back in order to play around with the latest and greatest. But at the moment, there's a lot of QA effort around the RTM image. So if you're interested in dog fooding and testing and playing with the device and helping out, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and switch to the RTM channel. That said, both utopic-devel and RTM share a lot of the same stuff. Generally, stuff will go into utopic-devel, and then it may or may not make it into RTM. So utopic-devel still does represent the tip of the iceberg as far as the latest and greatest.
And both of those channels have really started to slow down and focus on stability and bug fixing as we get ready to release both the first actual handsets and Ubuntu 14.10 itself.
Yeah, Lucas posted to the Ubuntu phone mailing list, I think last night. I think it was Lucas, who said, we need to only land critical fixes now. We're at the final end game. We need to focus on stability and critical fixes. So you probably won't see too many new features landing in the phone in the next few weeks while we fix any critical bugs that are outstanding.
All right, next question from Bhavesh. He says, I accessed my Ubuntu 14.04.1 LTS file system from Windows 8 using ex2 FSD in read-write mode. probably a bad idea. Now whenever I boot into Ubuntu, I see a black screen. I guess I'm going to replace it to 14.10 when it releases. Anyone knows why this happened? Windows messed up with the files. Yeah, so I've heard several instances of using these Windows EXTs and having them cause issues. You're generally safe if you're just using them to read the file system, but whenever you're writing changes to it, you risk the driver doing something different or wrong that ends up breaking it when you try and boot back into Ubuntu. And the same happens the other way too. If you use the NTFS driver to write to a Windows partition, you run the risk of that happening. All it used to be. I remember when the NTFS 3G driver was new, that was a more common occurrence. All right, Joe asks, would Canonical rather fight one horse-sized duck or 10 duck-sized horses? Nick and I were asked this question, only instead of a duck, it was a penguin. And if you go back through our Google Plus profiles a month or two, you'll see some pictures that somebody made of us based on our answers to that. But we haven't heard from Alan on which he would rather fight.
I'm not sure I'd want to fight 10 duck-sized horses. I think I'd want to pet them and keep them because they sound cute. Little tiny horses sound like the cutest thing on earth. I want one. Or 10. If someone's giving me duck-sized horses, I'll keep them. A horse-sized duck sounds scary, especially with the gigantic beak. I think he'd probably bite my head off. So if I had to fight at a push, I would fight 10 duck-sized horses. But I'd rather not fight them.
Hope you're the pacifist.
There you go.
All right, Nick is...
I'll await the image.
Will Ubuntu stick with Unity forever now, or are you planning on using a different desktop environment in the future? Forever is a very long time, but we have no plans to use anything else at the moment. Unity is our multi-device strategy. It's really core to that whole convergence idea. And so far, I think it's proven that the basic paradigms of Unity scale well to different form factors. So yeah, we're going to be sticking with Unity for the foreseeable future.
You never know; it might get rewritten again. It's already been written 4 times. Originally, it was in Mutter, then it was a Compiz, then Qt, now QML. So that's 4 times. So maybe you'll see Unity rewritten in Go. I don't know.
But it will still be Unity.
In Go. I love it.
Unity.
All right, Cornell, what do you think about Unity adopted by other distros recently? Manjaro? Did they drop the N?
It's Manjaro, yeah.
Okay.
I like this, and I kind of predicted this about, 2 years ago. I said that when 12.04 releases, because it's an LTS and Unity will be quite stable at that point, I predicted that other distros would pick it up. That didn't happen so much back then, but I think now that we've had a period of stability between 12.04 and 14.04, we are starting to see that. So with an LTS release, that Unity 7 is pretty stable and isn't changing dramatically, unlike the big changes that were happening over the period between 2010 and 2012. And the rewrites that happened over that period. I think since it's been in a couple of LTSs now, it's got to the point where people can actually have a stab at bringing it across to another distro without fear that we're going to rewrite it under them, and undo whatever work they've done. I also think that by the next LTS, Unity 8 will probably be easier to port than Unity 7 to other distros because it doesn't depend on things like Compiz, like big hairy things like that.
Yeah, I know Compass has been one of the bigger obstacles trying to port Unity to other platforms. Another one is the patches that we carry to upstreams like various GNOME projects, and we've been working to reduce the size of those couple of years, and I think that's really helped allow other distros to adopt it because they don't have to apply these big patches or muck up with their GNOME install. And a lot of that we got to give credence to the Ubuntu GNOME flavor, who's been working really hard to make sure that we can have Unity and GNOME shell working properly side by side and not conflicting, not having the Unity patches conflict with the upstream vanilla GNOME. So they've helped us improve that, and that's made it easier for Unity to be ported to other distros. And I think we'll see more of that. And as Alan said, Unity 8 does away with a lot of those big hairy dependencies, and that will make it a lot easier to port than Unity 7 is. All right, moving on. Campsy asks, is the Ubuntu SDK going to be available on other platforms? So this is something we bring up every 6 months or so with the SDK team. Because we use Qt Creator, it is technically possible to run it, the Ubuntu SDK, on other platforms. The problem right now is that the Ubuntu plugins that we use to add Ubuntu-specific functionality to the SDK really assume that you've got Ubuntu and the different tools that are available on Ubuntu to do things like connect to the devices and push things to the devices, to be able to build your packages and a change route for different releases and architectures. And a lot of that is going to be really, really hard to port. What we have done in the meantime, though, Daniel Holbach on our team has put together a VirtualBox disk image with the Ubuntu SDK tools already installed on it. And that's something that you can run in a virtual machine on any other platform. That's on developer.ubuntu.com /resources, I think. Somewhere on there, you can find that and download it. That's the easiest way to do Ubuntu app development at the moment.
I'll link it.
I know the SDK guys are super busy building the SDK for Ubuntu as the primary target. And while I agree with Mike that there's a lot of Ubuntuisms in there and assumptions that are made that you're running Ubuntu, you know, if you happen to have a legacy Apple OS X laptop that you wanted to have a go at porting this stuff across, I'm pretty sure that there is a fair amount that would, the ADB tools that we rely on would work. Most of the scripts are written in Bash, so they're just shell scripts, which OS X could do. I think it would probably be harder to port to Windows. But if someone wanted to try it, I don't think anyone in the SDK team has a Mac. So nobody in the SDK team, has even the possibility to test this stuff out on OS X, and also the motivation to do so, because they're far too busy getting it working and perfect on Ubuntu. But I would love to see it. If someone in the community could, do some analysis, I'm sure the SDK people, the SDK team, would point them in the right direction for, which bits are known to have Ubuntuisms in them, and I'm sure they'd help where they could in between the work. Did I just volunteer the SDK team to do some work? Oops. Is Mike still there, or is he zoned out?
No, Mike is talking to himself.
Sorry, I was muted.
It was enjoyable to watch.
All right, JNXD asks, steps to remove Android Studio installed through the UDTK. So first of all, the UDTK, the Ubuntu Developer Tools, I don't know what the C stands for. So this is work that Didier has been working on. It's DidRocks on IRC to make it easier to install Android development tools, and actually all kinds of development tools in Ubuntu. The steps for removing that, I don't know. Your best bet is to go to #ubuntu-desktop and look for didrocks and ask him. He would know. All right, next question. NT Technology. What are the major improvements in 14.04? So 14.04 was released in April. That was our most recent LTS. There were lots of improvements to Unity 7 in terms of performance, and there was a lot of work that went into the high DPI support in Unity 7. Are there any other major improvements that you guys can think of? I know there's a lot of updates under the hood to the latest versions of everything.
Yeah, so I have to think back to 14.04, huh?
Yeah, I think Nick and Alan have been on 14.10 for a while now, so they've already moved on and forgotten all that.
Yeah. There was some initial support for high-density displays, which was nice. Unity was the big stuff. 14.04's Unity is really quite nice. Those are the two that I cared about at the time. So.
I know my main.
I would suggest maybe going back and looking at some of the reviews. You know, like if what OMG covered or someone else, maybe the Ars Technica review talking about what was new. They generally do a good job, and of course, since they were time and place, they would have a good memory, unlike us.
So for my part, having the SDK tools there was a big thing. It being an LTS release, it's one of our supported versions, and it will be supported going forward through the SDK PPA.
Yeah, I was running the 14.04 on my laptop for some time, and I'm not quite sure why I upgraded to 14.10. At some point, I decided to upgrade to 14.10. Usually, I try and stick on the LTSs on my laptop wherever possible. I think I did a reinstall at some point because I changed the hard disk arrangement in my laptop or something, and I just grabbed whatever I had to hand, which was a 14.10 ISO, I think. So both good. 14.04 is great. If you don't want to have to worry about the pain that's coming up or potential pain that's coming up with Unity 8 and Mia, and you know, the new interesting things that are happening in 15.04 and 15.10 and 16.04, then just use 14.04. Stick on 14.04 LTS. That is what it's there for. Then you know you have a significantly lower churn. It's bug fixes, kernel updates, and XOR video driver updates, and security updates, and single platform.
All right. Next up is Sil, who asks, are you considering a change to the file system in the future to something like ButterFS? So that's going to be the kind of thing that
that's
the Ubuntu Online Summit. Sorry, Alan, what were you saying?
So I brought this up. No, I brought this up myself a few times because I know there are other platforms that have chosen to go with ButterFS as their default, and indeed I think the Yola phone running Sailfish uses ButterFS, and possibly some previous Nokia devices may have used Migo may have used ButterFS. ButterFS, the general response is laughter and, oh, that's the file system that eats your data, and you know, as a joke, because in the past it's had a reputation, you know, it's not stable. They haven't had a stable release yet. A lot of people do run it. I personally run it on my home server. I've got an array of 12 disks running ButterFS because, you know, someone's got to test this stuff, and you know, I'll just give you this small data point. I had a power outage recently. Some men were doing some work outside, and my server, I couldn't no longer mount the Btrfs volume. So that's all 12 2 GB drives are now unmountable. And right now, as I speak to you, I'm running a Btrfs check on those drives, being helped by one of the Btrfs developers in hash BTRFS. And my server has 8 gig of RAM, and it runs out of memory when it's doing the check. I've had to add 20 GB of swap in order to get the Btrfs check to actually run, and even then it fails. So yeah, I know some people will put a lot of weight behind Btrfs, and I'm one of them. But you know, it's got to be stable before we switch to it, and we tend to be conservative about those kind of things.
But if you want to bring it up, like I said, Ubuntu Online Summit is the place to talk about things like that. And I'm sure you will have plenty of people join in and tell you why that's a bad idea.
Or a good one. There's plenty of opponents. So
I'm sure it would be a lively discussion from both sides. All right, Fish246 asks, are there any plans to change the community repo system? Maybe attempt to unify community-submitted programs into a single repo, for example, RPM Fusion or the AUR. So we have some changes coming in that are already on the phone, where we're using click packages and a new store that supports click packages. This is an important change for us because it makes it a lot easier for independent developers, third-party developers to develop and publish apps and get them directly to the user without going through a lot of hurdles or a lot of review. In fact, there's almost no review at all right now, and we're very close to getting rid of the last bit of human intervention between the app developer submitting their app and it being published to the store. And a lot of that has to do with the structure around click packages and app confinement that we've developed in Ubuntu Phone and Unity 8, which will come to the desktop when Unity 8 comes to the desktop. For actual packages, we have PPAs, which let you deliver that. We've got a desktop store, but because it was using Debian packages, the review queue on that was always unmanageably long, and we're working hard to get through as many of those as we can without it being just a huge money and time sink for Canonical. So regular package archives for direct submission of apps did not work out very well for us. The click repos are working really well. There are some limitations as to what you can do in those, but it's made everything else quite a bit better. So that's the future for independent apps on Ubuntu.
And to clarify a couple of Mike's points, though, the review process is largely automated. It's not to say that there isn't a review process now. It's just that doesn't have to be a human review process, and the process can be automated because of the checks that are in place. So you can think of these applications as running inside of an isolated sandbox, and they all have to play nice, and they get each get their own little space, and they can't go out and do anything nefarious to your system. And so that's the idea, and that allows us to be much more agile in reviewing and improving things, and makes it much easier for you to package and submit things. So I agree. I think it would be interesting to see how that what sort of changes it brings to the desktop side of things.
And there's the two things I wanted to mention. Following on from what Nick said, that doesn't mean that anything goes. It doesn't mean that people can submit any old application and it gets into the store. We still have the ability to republish apps or have a conversation with a developer and let them know how it goes against some restriction or terms of service or whatever reason there might be that the app shouldn't be in the store. We still reserve the ability to do that, and we have done that already once. So it is a possibility for us to do that. It's not that anything goes. view process is very lightweight. I've submitted a few apps in the last couple of weeks, and well, yesterday, for example, I submitted an app and it was in the store within about 2 minutes, and I was able to install it on a phone. It was almost faster for me to upload my app to the store and then download it on my phone from the store than it was to send it down a USB cable to my phone. It's super quick. And the other thing is, on the subject of the desktop, LTS 1404 is still a supported platform, and we did have a lengthy queue and not enough resources to get through the queue of applications that were being submitted to the Software Center store, but we've hired additional resources, and that queue is being reduced very rapidly over since that person started in the company recently.
All right. What's the next question?
Yeah,
I think Mike's muted again.
Yes.
Yeah.
My hardware mute button works on my laptop now, so I've been using it all the time, and I forget when I do.
I think on Jim, and Jim is asking about is Ubuntu planning on using libinput? And he says, I'm dying for killer touchpad drivers, and shared resources seem to make sense here.
So I don't know what our plans are on that specifically. Do either of you know?
Well, I was kind of curious.
That's referring to, is that touchpad as in laptop, the touch area at the bottom of the keyboard?
I think his question is specifically about libinput, the new input library for Wayland.
Ah, okay. I don't know then.
So from what I've read, it's not Wayland specific, so we should be able to use it with Mir. But the person to ask would probably be Kevin Gunn in Hashabuntu-Unity. So if you can find him and ask him, or Thomas Voss, T. Voss on IRC, one of those might be able to answer you as to what our actual plans are on that. I think libinput is fairly new, so we may not actually have plans as of yet. Again, something to discuss in the Ubuntu Online Summit next month. Fish asks, are there any plans to change up the Ubuntu store? We already talked about that a little bit with the click packages. On the for app has actually been replaced with a store scope. So now you can go browse the store, read ratings and reviews, and install apps directly from the Ubuntu store scope on the phone. And that will be coming to the desktop as well. Whether or not there will continue to be a standalone app for the store, I don't know. The scope has been working really well on the phone, though, so it wouldn't surprise me if we just stick with that even on the desktop. Just Caracas asks, will there be a way to showcase our apps in an online store so we can link to it from our sites? Short answer is yes, there will be. That's Martin Albacetti's team who's working on that. I know there's already work on a public web front end for the App Store. It's just not been deployed yet. And I'm not entirely sure when that's going to happen, but it should hopefully be happening soon. All right, Campsy, why did you drop Python on Ubuntu Touch? Do either of you want to take that one?
I don't think we did. Python is still on the phone. Python 3 exists on the phone. It's just that it's not one of our recommended platforms for developing apps in the SDK. And QML, HTML5, and you could create a C++ app. But as I understand it, you could create a Python app and put whatever Python modules inside your application. We won't necessarily have all the Python modules in the world installed on the phone, but you could potentially put Python apps on the phone.
Yeah, it certainly works. You still need a UI layer, and so, but yeah,
Mhm.
I know
definitely
there's
works.
been some work with PyEtherSide to allow you to use QML front ends with Python. It's just not one of our recommended development platforms, mainly because of the resource requirements of running Python as compared to running a C++ app, or even a QML app, which is just being interpreted by a C++ Qt application. But it's still there if you want to use it. We won't stop you from using it as long as you can do it all within your click package. Somebody's even written a Java app for Ubuntu and included the entire Java runtime in their click package to make that work. It's not ideal, but it is possible.
Yeah, I gave a talk at a conference recently, and Sam, who wrote that app, was at the conference, and I just happened to have a screenshot of the update manager on one of my slides, and it happened to show that his app needed updating on my phone. And yeah, his app is the biggest app in the store at the moment, so it weighs in at something like 50 or 60 meg for his Bitcoin app, which is quite cool, you know.
All right, just Caracas says he recently met a fellow IT guy and he laughed at me for using Ubuntu. He said that it was Linux for people who can't use Linux. What would you guys have replied to someone if someone said that to you? So I am sure I'm not alone in having this done to me also. I'm sure Nick and Alan, you've run into this before. So how have you guys responded to this?
Typically, someone like that I would consider sort of a zealot, and I don't know. It's just interesting. The statement is kind of confusing to me.
I think it
It's
depends
like
on how you
saying,
said it. Some people say this just jokingly, trying to give you a hard time,
sure.
and others really mean it.
I mean, this isn't unique to IT at all. Any space I've ever been in, I'm thinking of like sailing, cycling, mechanical work, woodworking. Everything I've ever done all has the sort of uh, tools or things that people use or enjoy using that the old guard of people or a vanguard of people look down upon, right? So I think you find that everywhere. I just tend to mostly ignore them. I mean, if they want to have that opinion or viewpoint, that's more power to them, I guess. But it is always confusing to me because whatever it is that you're doing, you are actually doing it. So I'm using Linux by running Ubuntu. Whether or not they agree doesn't make it untrue. So it's always kind of confusing for me to hear
So
that statement.
I'm fine with people having a bit of banter, and I think it's good fun to, critique other people's life choices, whether it be the car they bought, their hairstyle, the clothes, the distribution of choice. That when you're with a friend or a co-worker, that kind of stuff is, pretty normal in most walks of life. And usually it's not meant maliciously, it's the fact that you happen to choose Ubuntu is probably not going to affect your life partner, your choice of life partner. It probably is, as opposed to any other Linux distro, it's probably not going to affect your job prospects. It may do if you work in that particular field, but these are minor, trivial things that whatever, dude. See you
Yeah.
later.
So
It's
if I know that the person is just joking with me about it, I just say that I use Ubuntu because it works for me and it gets out of my way when I don't want it in my way. Uh, I'm not in the it. It doesn't interest me to fight with my OS to make it do things. If it's somebody that I know
right,
is
and
being
people change over
serious,
time.
if they're being serious, I smile and I nod and I back away slowly.
People change over time. I've had people who will run a really complicated desktop Linux for example, running Debian with DWM, which, as I understand it, you have to recompile the desktop if you ever want to change any settings. Pretty hardcore stuff. And then they'll switch and use OS 10 later in life because they just want the easy life. So, from points in their life, and it's a bit of banter, but I don't think it's worth getting worked up over.
And it's not unique to Ubuntu either. If you were using Fedora, there would be somebody who uses Gentoo who says the same. If you're using Gentoo, you're going to find somebody who builds Linux from scratch who's going to say the same thing to you. So it's kind of like a one-upsmanship sometimes, and you're never going to have something that's not going to elicit that kind of reaction from somebody.
I don't know, the guy who builds his own computer out of, resistors and capacitors and individual discrete components, or builds his computer out of redstone in Minecraft, has climbed up the computing evolutionary ladder higher than most. So he gets the ability to do it. But
yeah,
the rest of us losers who are just installing it off a USB key.
He's going to run into a mathematician who's going to give him a hard time about using real-world objects.
Yes.
All right, moving on, since we're almost out of time. Taylor says he's been unable to port Ubuntu Touch to his tablet, an Asus TF201, since the switch to the flipped model on the porting guides now have conflicting information. Where can I find the latest information on porting? So we know that the porting guides have gotten out of date. It's on to-do list to update when we've got time. The best thing you can do right now is join #Ubuntu-touch and find some people in there who can help you and get you the latest information. Alan, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, it's tricky. We had someone drop by. We had someone drop by the IRC channel last night, and my advice to them was, we know the wiki page is out of date. It takes us, a certain set of skills to get that all completely accurate. I too have a device that I would like to port Ubuntu to, but the time is a factor, and it's quite a labor-intensive task. It's not just a case of with these portable devices. It's not just a case of sticking a USB key in and pressing enter a few times and you're installed. There's a lot of work to do, and those instructions can get quite complicated. And I have a lot of respect for people over on the XDA developer forum who spend significant portions of their time trying to get CyanogenMod or whatever their favorite ROM is working on an Android device. It's a fair amount of work, and in general, it's not documented anywhere very well. That's not to excuse our documentation for being terrible as well, but it's just one of those very complicated, time-intensive tasks that nobody has the time to sit down and actually work it all out and write it up. So what's on the porting guide on the wiki is a kind of first, and if someone wants to have a go at porting and noting down all the steps they went through and just replace that guide with their own notes, as long as it works, I'm happy with that. I don't think there's anything sacred about that page. It could well be replaced, or if someone wrote a new guide or some blog posts or an article, then more power to you.
Right. And it is on the wiki, so if you've got anything that you want to change or some notes you want to add to let people know that certain information may be out of date and not work anymore, go ahead and log into the wiki and add that to it.
Yeah, I would just say the best documentation for your device is an implementation, right? So, and that's really the best way to do it. Obviously, you're not quite there yet, or maybe you were there at one time. But I would agree with Alan. Try and ask specific questions, and at the end of the day, however far you get, and whatever information you're able to share, that will certainly help others. But it is sort of an uphill climb. Each device is unique, so.
Nick Isudo asks, how long will the GNOME fallback?
And you also somewhat dependent.
Go ahead, Alan.
No, carry on.
I was moving on to the next question, so if you had something to add to this, go ahead and say that.
Go on.
Okay. Um, Nikki Suda asked, how long will the GNOME fallback option be available for? I want to prepare myself for the end of my favorite GNOME environment. So the GNOME fallback in GNOME 3, I think they're planning on supporting for some significant amount of time. And then, of course, you've got Ubuntu Mate, or Mate, which is the old GNOME 2 code base that has been revived by a separate group, and they're continuing to develop that going forward. So you've got those two things to choose from. There's no plans to end either one of those, so I think you're pretty well safe in your favorite environment so far. Just Caracas. Will there be some way of handling programs that don't support Retina, so I don't have to change my resolution every time I want to use one of those? For new apps written with the Ubuntu SDK and the Ubuntu UI toolkit, that will all be built in. They'll automatically scale properly to whatever size and resolution your screen is. For legacy apps, I don't know if you're going to be able to change that on a per app basis or not. Do you guys have any information on that?
Sorry, alarms going off all over the place on my phone. Another one. No.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I guess I haven't really run into this yet, and I don't have a crazy high definition display, but I do have, I guess, what you would consider a Retina display. I just haven't run into it, and certainly all of the future applications, as Mike already said, are sort of already future-proof for this. I have occasionally seen old icons, but that didn't scale well. But most things are SVD or something else, and so we've sort of gone through that already in the past. So these locally for me on my desktop, I'm not seeing lots of issues. But
I think for a lot of the apps, you can just change the DPI in your X settings, and that will. It's not perfect, but it'll at least make them more usable. And I think there's work going into GTK and Upstream Qt to make those work better also, but I don't have any specifics about that. All right, moving right along. Chubfish asks, he's wondering if Unity will change its appearance somewhat, or maybe a GNOME adaptation. So Unity on the desktop will definitely be changing its appearance. If you're paying attention to what's going on the phone and the tablet version of Unity, a lot of that's going to be coming to the desktop soon. There will still be all the desktop features that you're familiar with, window stacking and moving, all that kind of stuff. But the visual styling of Unity 8 will be coming to the desktop in the near future. One more question from Chubfish. Will there be more focus on drivers for graphics cards? So there's been a lot of announcements recently from NVIDIA and AMD both about their future plans for graphics cards. AMD is standardizing on an open source foundation layer, and then there will be both an open source and a closed source driver built on top of that, which should support both Wayland and Mir in addition to the latest Xorg. And then NVIDIA is also has major plans to support Wayland and Mir going forward with the new kernel interfaces, as well as the latest Xorg. So there will be a lot more driver work going on, but probably not anything that most users are really going to notice, because everything pretty well works at the moment and should continue to work going forward. And I think that's all the questions that we have, which is good because we are a few minutes over time already. All right, so just a reminder, we do this every week, except for we will not be doing it next week. We will all be away from our regular offices and not around to do this. But the week after, we'll be back, same time, same place, 1500 UTC on Tuesday, on ubuntuonair.com. You can follow Ubuntu On Air on Twitter to get updates on when other broadcasts are happening. And you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ubuntuonair, to watch this and other previously recorded videos. All right. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, everybody on IRC, for joining us. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you later.
Talk.